We're on.
All right, we're here. We're here for this is actually our first recruiting show of the 2025 season. Crash and I spoke last week and we kind of did a little test run on this kind of stuff. Um, and what we're going to do each week is we're going to try and identify some of the top performers of the USC commits. We're going to kind of keep it the commits, not necessarily the targets. And then we're going to talk about guys that visited USC on game weeks. And this particular week, USC had a fairly impressive visitor list for Missouri State. It wasn't really a tough opponent. So these guys knew that USC was probably going to take care of business and beat them really, really bad. But there's still plenty of takeaways for these recruits to have from these games. And I started off with Duvet Williams. And he was short and to the point. And he just said USC looked good. Energy was crazy. Could see myself there. Duvet has been a kid for quite a while that we thought would end up at USC if USC played good football. I mean, I don't think they have to play great football. This is a kid from Los Angeles, kind of has grown up loving USC. So USC is going to kind of have to screw up or find guys they like better, which will be a bit difficult. So there were a couple of predictions today from Steve Wiltfong and Adam Gorney for Duvet Williams. So USC is in a real strong spot for him. And another guy that I hit up right after him was the top defensive line target for the class of 2027, Elijah Harmon from Inglewood High School. Um, and what I asked him, I just wanted his overall impression on what he saw, knowing that the opponent wasn't that strong. And he said the energy that USC played with Saturday was electric, even in the second half when the backup started to come in and the dominance didn't start until the end of the game. So everybody kind of noticed the energy and the way that the USC football players were all supporting each other from start to finish. Obviously, everything went well for USC, so we're not trying to oversell the performance on Saturday, but recruits do notice this stuff, and it does matter. And the guy that stood out for him was Cameron Fountain. Another top prospect for USC was Darius Rogers from Murrieta Valley. Darius Johnson, excuse me. Darius Rogers played at USC. And he said basically the same thing. He was excited to see the energy at USC and what it was like on game day. Kids from California look at USC, and they've looked at UCLA this way in the past too. But right now, USC is kind of the program for these kids in Southern California. So it's at a point where if USC just kind of takes care of business this football season, I don't see the recruiting momentum slowing down at all. The one issue that USC is going to probably have in with the class of 2027 is it's going to potentially be a class of fewer than 20 guys. They've got 32 committed guys right now for the class of 2026, and they're probably going to add three more. USC is going to be really selective with the class of 2027, but they're off to a good start with those guys. And the top performers this week, we picked out a couple of guys. Crash, why don't you just talk about the two guys that kind of stood out this week, at least from what we were able to gather online?
So we had uh for Richardson football, we had Jamie and Winfield having an impressive performance both on defense and on special teams. Really, if you look at his numbers, he had five tackles, four tackles for loss, three sacks, and a blocked point attempt. P blocked PAT. So just you can see just that he's really really going to be like completely a spark there on defense. And then also had the game-winning PAT block there too. So just really, I
Yeah.
think it just shows just how much of a force he can be on this defense, especially with just how much this defense has been improving ever since Danton Lynn took over as coordinator there. And I think you can just see, I think a lot of guys are seeing that they can fit to them well. And then plus it seems like just Danton Lynn, he just seems like a guy they can relate to. And he has a great way, I've heard, especially from having covered USC practices in the past, that he just breaks things down and doesn't leave anyone behind. They don't move on to phase two until everyone gets phase one. So I think that's something I think that can really show why I think he'd be a great fit in Danton Lynn's defense. And then on the offensive side, quarterback Jonas Williams went 17 for 35 and threw 315 yards with four touchdowns and no interceptions. And it just shows that Lincoln Riley, just being the quarterback genius that he is just really able to keep getting great quarterbacks in. And I think especially that's encouraging knowing that with how Jade Mayava performed on Saturday, and as well as Hassan Longstreet, that you can just keep getting these good quarterbacks every other year. I think USC can have a lot of success, especially if the backups got time to get comfortable and then develop and then maybe see some time in some of these easier games like we saw with Longstreet on Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah, J-Man Winfield was kind of a surprise that when he committed, he I think he'd only visited maybe one time. He had a relationship with Henny, and but this is a guy that a lot of the guys that I know in Texas think that he is, if not the top interior defensive lineman, he's like one of the top two or three. So he was a huge get for USC, and just kind of to piggyback on the defensive line, Danton Lynn and what Eric Anderson are building at USC. Excuse me, from a defensive perspective, that defensive line looks light years better this year than it did. Excuse me, I'm gonna get a little water here. I take a baby aspirin and I eat those things. It got stuck in my throat. So, um, but it's the defensive line that we watched yesterday. Obviously, I mean, excuse me, on Saturday was nothing that looked what they looked like last year. Now the opponent wasn't that strong, but you're just seeing bigger, faster, stronger guys. And when you look at the 2026 USC defensive line recruiting class and the guys they're adding from that, in Jamion Winfield, in Samote Katsawana, in Tom Topui, in Braden Jones, Malik Brooks. I know I'm going to leave some guys out on here that are important players, but it's going to be just fun to watch this football team over the next few years and just watch that they're going to get to the point to where their defensive line, like Lincoln Riley talked about after the game, we don't want our defense to be the most improved and people talking about how improved our defense is. We want people talking about our defense being among the top 10 in the country. And I think that's the direction you're going when you start bringing in a class of guys like Jamion Winfield. And with Jonas Williams, just wanted to add some stuff on where I see this going with him when he gets to USC. Saw a really strong performance from Husan Longstreet, but just imagine the competition that there's going to be when Jonas Williams arrives, and those two guys, Husan Longstreet and Jonas Williams, are out for that starting job after Jaden Mayava moves on. So anyway, it was a good week for USC from a team perspective and a recruiting perspective. And I think that, we're going to spend some time every week talking about the USC football game and just, you know, the opponent. I kind of likened USC playing Missouri State to me golfing against Tattoo from Fantasy Highland. He's you're too young to probably know who that is, but there are still takeaways that you can glean from this game, and just talk about what your takeaways, Crash.
So my takeaways were I was just really impressed with Jade Mayava just having that start. I mean, he was really inconsistent last year. I thought he had some good moments, but he also had some bad, not so great moments too last year after he assumed the starting role from Miller Moss. But this game, I was really impressed with just how just confident he was, just how calm he played, and just how much he seemed to really just step into that leadership role. And I think we kind of started to see that near the end of last year once started speaking to the media. It seemed like he was starting to get more open. I remember one time I covered, he was like, "How's everybody doing?" before he even started, even started taking questions. But now we're seeing him just really step in with confidence and lead the offense. And I think you obviously saw, in addition to Mayava, really impressed with that running back room. And not just from Eli Sanders, Wayman Jordan, and Brian Jackson, who Lincoln Riley's who everyone especially has seemed to be calling that three-headed monster in the backfield.
Yeah.
But I think we're also then seeing just obviously King Miller had an impressive day. I think he led the team with the most rushing yards despite being a walk-on and probably not going to see the field that much, but that just shows how much depth there is. I think Lincoln Riley was not lying when he said that this is the best running back room he's had since he got to SC. Then in addition, obviously, I think Makai Lemon had a great game. And then I still think there's just a lot of obviously places that I think you just really saw, especially on the offense. Then defensively, I think you just saw, like you said, Cameron Fountain, and then just a bunch of other guys just stepping up and just really, playing, I think, really good football all around.
Yeah, the guy with Braylon Shelby was pretty active as well on the outside, and I just again, it's hard to take away a whole lot of stuff on how these guys performed. They gave up 13 points. The touchdown they gave away was kind of a broken play defensively. But the guys like it comes down to seeing guys just when the live bullets are flying and just seeing how they move. And you mentioned the running backs room. You know, I think we all had a clear understanding of why Wayman Jordan was getting a lot of hype from the start of spring ball until the start of the football season. Watching a guy like that move, Eli Sanders' explosiveness and the speed that he has. I think Eric McKinney put something up today on our message board. I think his top speed was like 21.8, 21.9 miles per hour. I'm not sure if you saw that on that touchdown run. And I think that ranks second among all the players on this past college football weekend. So they've added some speed. Tanook Hines was in there. That's another guy to look for down the road. Might be airing the ball out a little bit to him. Might be able to gain some separation on those deep balls. But there was a lot to take away, and I think that even the recruits like a Madden Reardon asking him because he's going to be on the football team in January. And he just said that the team's definitely more focused and there's less drama. Last year, he felt that they were very individual. It felt like there was a lot of individuals on the team, especially in the wide receiver room. He said, and just thought that they were a lot more focused on what was going on. And I think that even the fans were paying attention to what was going on the sidelines. Was there any stuff that you watched from from that perspective that you could see from the television? I was only able to watch like half the game, so I still haven't seen a lot of it. But you could definitely see that these guys are supporting each other in a pretty strong way.
1000% Scott. And I think one thing that I think I didn't really see much of, but heard a ton about both when I got to the Coliseum after tailgating, as well as after the game, and just as reports coming out, was what the team wore during the Trojan Walk.
Yeah,
Normally in the past, they got for home games, they can wear whatever they want. And what if everyone's talking about, oh, let's see how dripped out guys are, all that, like rate the drip, all that stuff. There was none of that this year. And Lincoln Riley said that he gave the team a choice and the team voted to all wear the same thing, which I think speaks to just the culture there and just how it's like they want to be a team. And I think rather than just trying to, show off their individualism, which obviously, I mean, when you're winning like that first year, no one's really caring. But as soon as the losses start to pile up and you're not winning at the standard that's expected, as has happened the last 2 years,
yeah,
people are going to talk about that. People look for anything once the wins aren't there that could point to a problem. And obviously, USC is not the only team I've seen this with in the past. I won't get into examples, but I'm sure everyone knows them when they see them.
yeah.
But I think also just going to the game itself, I think you saw guys more focused even after they got pulled. Like Jaden Mayava was really just locked in even after he came out. And Hassan Longstreet went in. That's a guy I forgot to mention earlier who I thought also had a great game and showed that if Mayava were to falter down the line, I think, is a more than capable of commanding that offense as a starting quarterback. But I think you saw like everyone was bought in the entire time, whether they were starting, came in late, came in off the bench, or didn't play at all.
Yeah, and again, everything kind of went USC's way. There wasn't a whole lot of adversity, so the emotions weren't going to get too out of control at times. But the personal fouls weren't there, and you could kind of see Trumaine Carroll's imprint on this football program. And I remember back in June when I asked one of the players on the team just his first thoughts on adding Coach True to the program, and he just said this discipline is going to be a lot different, and even to the details to where before pregame, no shirts are going to be off, and everybody's kind of going to look coordinated, as you mentioned. And I do think there is something about that. I think with USC kind of getting behind on NIL, I think they were letting the guys be very individual with the attire, and it sounds like to me like Lincoln Riley was going to let that continue. But it is impressive that it was the player's choice to come off that bus all dressed the same. And that definitely leads you to believe there's a lot of cohesiveness going on there, which is a good sign for USC coming down. When they start getting some tougher games.
But I do want to go back to one thing you said about Trumaine Carroll, actually. I think
Yeah,
it's something I've heard in interviews. He did an interview with Collier on the Victory podcast, and then also just what Collier and Cody Kessler have been talking about there that I've been catching on to is they just have been saying, and reports have been saying that it's just And I think it was what? It's like he was saying like you do it right or you do it again. I think that was he said something like that. And I think that just shows that his mentality. And like you said, like I think going back to what you're saying when you talk to players after practice about his imprint on the program is just he's like, you're doing it right and that's the only way it's happening.
Yeah.
You're not I'm nobody's getting to slack off or just try to go through the motions. And I think that's a change that we've seen. And I think you're even seeing the warm-ups because in the past I've seen I don't want to say USC has been slacking off, but I've seen them just kind of just going through the motions of warm-ups. It did not look that way this year. They looked
Yeah.
much more laser focused, at least compared to some teams where I've seen like I think I've seen Utah come in a couple years ago laser focused the whole time.
Yeah.
But yeah, the USC has just looked a lot more focused, and I think that's going to be just a big culture thing that'll help this team in some of those tougher games as you got tougher opponents coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, I even in practices, the short amount of time that we're allowed to view practices was basically just warm ups and some early individual drills. But I paid attention the cornerbacks and the safeties because that's usually like where we're located. We're watching practice and the linebackers too. And those coaches they'll run those guys through these simple drills four, five, six times until they get it right. So it is definitely attention to detail. And I watch a lot of practices. A lot of times when a guy just kind of screws up the drill and he just kind of goes right back to the back of the line. But the way the USC coaching staff is operating, they'll just say, get back over here and come back. We're going to do this again. Got it wrong second time. And they just do it until they do get it right. So I do like a lot of the changes. And it goes back to an article that I wrote about 3 weeks ago. It's just hard for me to imagine with the coaching staff that USC has assembled, and we'll even include Coach True in that, and the support staff guys that they have, and with the upgraded roster that they have from 2024. It's just hard for me to believe that USC is going to go on and have another 6-6 football season. And I think despite the opponent not being that strong, they took care of business and they won by 60 points. So there's definitely a lot to look forward to. I don't think they're going to be challenged a whole lot this week with Clay Helton come back to the Coliseum for the first time since he was let go. But what are your thoughts on what we're going to experience when Clay Helton walks out of the tunnel onto the field at the Coliseum? Crash.
Well, to start, I think Clay Helton may get booed. I think a bit unfairly. I think like I've mentioned when we talked last week that I think he is like a good guy, just maybe wasn't the right guy for SC. But even still, he had some success at the start of his tenure. I mean, got a Pac-12 title and a Rose Bowl, something USC has yet to see. And I'm not saying they can't get back to winning conference titles, Rose Bowls, playoff games, even a natty. But I'm just saying, you just think about the success he had near the start of his tenure. So I think that should just still, I think fans should just, be like, you know what? They should be thankful for what he was able to do and just, be wishing him the best. Obviously, not Saturday. Obviously, I want
Yeah.
USC to come out and just completely destroy Georgia Southern. But still, I don't think he should be, booed when the Eagles run out of the tunnel.
Yep.
But I think this game should probably look a lot similar to how last week's game was, especially because Georgia Southern didn't have a great game. They lost 42-14 at Fresno State. But I think still, especially just if this team plays how they played last week, just laser focused, I think can be another just massive, massive victory. But also, we get to see a lot of, those second stringers, more of Hassan Longstreet and just more of these guys who are going to have to assume bigger roles in the years to come.
Yep. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the game that I went to this week. I'm in Hawaii right now. I'm leaving. I'm flying back home tonight. But I went to go see Talanoa Ely, four-star USC linebacker commit, and they Kahuku faced Bishop Gorman, and Bishop Gorman's got a couple of guys that USC has been hot after, and in class of 2026 safety Jet Washington, and class of 2027 cornerback Hayden Stepp. And the one thing that's kind of disappointing to me is Talanoa Ely is such a prolific playmaker at linebacker. It's it's hard to watch him play edge for Kahuku. He's the best guy to be able to play that position. He's the one guy that's going to be able to probably get pressure on the quarterback, but it's definitely not his natural position and where he's best at. But he had a sack. He had all kinds of tackles, chasing guys from behind. So he had a good game. Bishop Gorman shut out Kahuku, so there wasn't much offense. But the one thing we learned this weekend, it seemed like Hayden Stepp, class of 2027, he's at least one of the top three cornerbacks on the West Coast. He told me that USC's kind of like falling off a little bit with him right now, that they've got too many guys committed from the class of 2026. I thought we might see him at the Coliseum at some point this year. Who knows? We still might. But Jet Washington asked him also if he could potentially take a visit. He's committed to the University of Oregon. He's a five-star safety from Bishop Gorman, obviously. And he didn't shut down the topic of potentially taking a visit to USC. USC apparently has reached out to his father, so I guess there is some interest there. USC would like to add a safety still in this class. Jet is one of those. Davon Benjamin also committed to Oregon as another target there. So there's not a whole lot of recruiting stuff, positive recruiting stuff to talk about from this past weekend when I was at Kahuku. But this upcoming weekend, we got a couple of big games. I'm going to be at St. John Bosco versus St. Francis Academy. I think St. Francis Academy is top five, ranked in the top five this year. Then you also got Mater Dei is playing Kahuku at Santa Ana Stadium. So got a couple of big games. I think Sarah High School might play Oaks Christian this weekend. So we'll figure out where we're going to go. But you ever been to any high school football games, Crash?
It's been a while, I'll say that. Obviously, I
You're
mean,
high school, right?
that and yeah, but I went to Sage Hill, which plays eight man now, so
Yeah.
not really a ton to see there. Although, actually, little story here, my dad and I used to go watch Corona Del Mar High play at Newport Harbor Stadium at like the CIF when I was like a little kid. I remember like
Yeah.
going to those games. We'd stay till about halftime and then leave. It was just like he's like, "Oh, you want to check out this high school football?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And we kind of fun. So that's kind of the extent of my high school games. So I'm definitely not opposed to checking out and learning more about just these guys that USC is actively targeting, especially in the Southern California area, which, as we've talked about before, General Manager Chad Bowden has made a huge priority to really reestablish USC with the Southern California football and just build those relationships and get those guys who are practically in SC's backyard to want to come and play at the Coliseum.
I think that Chad, one thing I got to applaud Chad for is that he knows how successful Pete Carroll was at USC and what he did to bring on that success from at least from a recruiting perspective. And this past week, um, Chad, Dre Brown, and Gavin Morris were all at a Snoop League practice, and they were there to see the Baldwin Hills Bruins. So we're seeing the Trojans getting out and about into the city and trying to reestablish those roots. And I think now you have to extend those roots outside of the city of LA, because unfortunately, high school football in LA is really kind of dying out. But Southern California has definitely been a priority, and Chad and his staff are doing everything that you need to do to make the people in Southern California, not just the players, but the coaches, feel like priorities. So it's going to be interesting for me in the upcoming weeks. I'm going to start getting some feedback from the high school coaches as well, to kind of get their thoughts on what they're seeing from USC, maybe on the field and from a recruiting perspective. So anyway, so this was a good first show. It's not overly exciting right now. I think as the weeks go on, we're going to see the visitor list maybe kind of expand to not just a few guys from Southern California, but we'll get guys from out of state. And I think we're really kind of looking at the University of Michigan game when they come to the Coliseum. Isn't that week 6?
I think it's something like that.
Yeah.
Week 6, I think, yeah, is that game, especially with just how much hype around it. I mean, I think for the longest time, and I'm still not sure yet, like that was kind of the game USC's kind of going all out. Like I don't think you could even buy single game tickets for that one when I was looking on the
Right.
website about a month ago, just as I was figuring out my ticket options. And I was just thinking, yeah, they're going all in. It's either you got to buy the season pass or you got to do like one of their mini packages of 3, 4, 5 games.
We can talk about this off the air, but um, are you still hanging out with the in the student section, or well, like what are you doing? What are your plans when you go to games? Because what I was thinking is we might get you down there on the sideline and have you kind of roam around, talk to the students, and talk to people up in the stands.
I'm absolutely up for that. Yeah, that has been kind of what I've been doing so far this season, just due to
Yeah,
kind of the options of it. But definitely, yeah, I've been kind of there for most games. It's kind of my game plan for the year.
right on. We'll look forward to taking advantage of that. Well, Crash, thanks, man, for joining us. We're going to look forward to doing this every week, everyone. We might even do a couple of these a week if if it makes sense to do that, because there might be some recruiting events that come up, and maybe some team stuff that we may want to dedicate an entire show to just on how USC played and just our perspective on that as well. But anyway, thanks for joining us this year, and we're looking forward to seeing you next week as well.
Thanks again, Scott. Fight on.
All right, fight on.